Have you heard the saying, if you've got haters, that means you're doing something right? Well, that couldn't be more true than when it comes to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors because, well, for example, just very recently I heard something from Austin Rivers that sounded like, hate. And if you don't believe me, here's the clip of what he said.
He's by far, to me, probably the hardest player to guard in the NBA. It's not even close. You can't touch him. They give him every call. They set illegal screens for him the entire game. Draymond, these guys set illegal screens. They don't call it because they want to see him shoot because it's good for basketball. It's good for the NBA. That doesn't happen with any other player in the NBA. It's nuts.
He's pretty much saying that Steph and the Warriors cheat, which is why Steph is so hard to guard. So after hearing this, like every curious person, I wondered what would make him say such a thing. So logically, I followed up my curiosity with a quick Google search and then everything made sense. I mean, look at what I found. Time and time again, Steph Curry has completely barbecued him on the NBA courts. And when I say barbecued, I mean Chicago style. Because look at this. In their respective career, they've played each other 26 times, with Steph winning 22 of those matchups. That literally means Steph wins 9 out of 10 whenever they face off against each other? And it gets better because the funny part is, on average, Steph drops 29 points per game on Rivers, along with 5 rebounds and 6 assists, on shooting percentages of 51, 45, and 94. Then, on the other end of that spectrum, Rivers averaged 9.7 points on efficiencies of 41.6, 28, and 62.3. From Rivers' perspective, Steph is a monster, and quite frankly, his worst nightmare. So it makes sense that Rivers would say such things because that's the only thing he has going for him when it comes to matching up against Steph. And I think the only thing I got from this soundbite is the fact that Austin Rivers is a hater. Anyway, moving on here. It's not just the players that are hating. The NBA seems to not like the Warriors either, or at the very least, they don't want them winning anymore. And it makes sense from their perspective. I mean, the Warriors already have one of the biggest fan bases in the NBA, so from a financial perspective, they are kind of maxed out. Now, if other teams win, the league would appear more competitive, and that's better for business. So what exactly do the leagues do to balance out the scales? Well, they get the league officials to do their bidding. Because look, on January 19th of 2023, the Warriors visited the Celtics at TD Garden out in Boston. In the last 2 minutes of overtime, the referees missed 5 crucial calls to swing the favor in the game of the ones wearing green. Here's what I mean. When the score was 115 to 111 for the Celtics, Jason Tatum clearly should have been called for a 3-second defensive violation. This would have resulted in a technical free throw for the Warriors and possession. Then, literally just a few seconds later, on a Jordan Poole back-cut layup, Malcolm Brogdon hit him on the arm right in front of an official who pretended not to see anything. Sheesh, guys. And that one was big. Then, on the Celtics' next possession, Al Horford should have been called for an offensive 3-second violation, which would have been a turnover, but instead, it turned into a Jason Tatum three-pointer. And that ain't the end of it either. When Klay was guarding Jaylen Brown, he swiped down at the ball, which hit all ball, by the way, but the referees called that a foul, which took Klay out of the game and gave Brown 2 free throw attempts. Then lastly, with 6.3 seconds left on the clock, Al Horford went for a shot attempt, and while that shot could have been called for a 24-second shot clock violation, the refs missed it, and therefore the Warriors only had 3 seconds for a final play instead of 6 seconds if the refs would have got it right. My goodness, guys. I know this is just one game, but I've seen calls or missed calls like this happening way too much to Steph Curry and the Warriors. I mean, there were some pretty absurd non-calls for Steph in the finals last year, but thank God his greatness pulled out the win for the Warriors. Anyway, moving on here. Aside from players and league officials hating on the Warriors, apparently other organizations are as well. And it makes sense because look, the truth is, the Warriors have been going to the finals every year where they were healthy, while some organizations in the league haven't even smelled the playoffs for over a decade. ESPN's Zach Lowe actually reported a while ago that some teams were complaining that the Warriors have a quote-unquote spending advantage. They actually want to break the Warriors apart to dismantle their dynasty, But when Warriors GM Bob Myers got wind of this, he responded, "You should be allowed to spend on your own players. I mean, we drafted a lot of these guys, we developed them. It's not like we went out there and signed all these guys as free agents and built some team that way. Larry Riley's the guy that drafted Curry. I was here when we drafted Clay. We drafted Draymond. We drafted Poole. We traded for Wiggins. Nobody wanted Wiggins. I mean, nobody was saying anything then." And it actually does make sense. I mean, if there's a bird rule for keeping players you drafted, there should be some rule for paying less taxes for players that you develop. Otherwise, that's a disincentive to developing talent, which is counterproductive for the league. That's like saying to a team, you should only develop some, but not all of your players. Otherwise, you'll be essentially developing them for other teams. Warriors owner Joe Lacob actually went on a podcast with Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner and discussed this issue a bit. But do you know what the NBA did? That's right. They fined him $500,000. Anyway, it doesn't stop there. Legends of the game, like key members of the 90s Bulls, players such as Dennis Rodman, are also sending their hate towards the Warriors, simply because the Warriors are reaching a level of dominance that could surpass the Bulls as the greatest dynasty ever. I mean, let's listen to what the 90s Rebound King said.
I don't know. It's just very hard to watch, because once you play the game the way we played it, intensity, just competitiveness. But now it's more like, I don't want to watch players coming down shooting 50-footers. That's not basketball. I mean,
now, maybe I am a little biased here, but I'd say that the intensity and competitiveness are just as high as the 90s, if not more. I mean, the pace is higher, players are way more athletic, and players are even playing until a much later age. Anyway, it wasn't just him from the Bulls either. Scottie Pippen has been on air saying some crazy stuff, and the one thing he always tries to fit in is how the 96 Bulls would beat the 2017 Warriors. I mean, the chatter is everywhere, and actually here's the media's perspective of why there's so much hate.
I've seen it. You can feel it from other players in the league, and Matt, you can speak to this as well. When you talk to people about Steph, there's this resentment because he changed the game. I really believe that he has changed the way the game is played.
Yes.
And I think a lot of guys came into the league thinking, I'm going to grind, I'm going to play defense, I am going to play the way I saw growing up. And Steph has shown that there's a whole different style to the game, and when you play that game, you need different pieces to fit around you. And he has made a lot of guys had to either change their own games, or they've kind of slid out of the league a little bit with the way things used to be.
Anyway, guys, one thing is for sure. If the Warriors can somehow develop Jonathan Kuminga and James Wiseman into their potential, there's going to be a ton of hate headed the Warriors' way for years to come.